We have shared Ben Roethlisberger clips in the past because he has a YouTube channel. It's called Channel 7. And I feel like we should do it as well today, being that ballots are due for NFL MVP and those that obviously have the esteemed privilege of voting. We will get to some clips in just a second as well of at least one MVP voter who has revealed who he's riding with when it comes to Lamar versus Josh. But the guy that was once the villain, and maybe he always will be in your mind, Big Ben Roethlisberger, had this to say when ranking his top 7 quarterbacks, Sarah, this season. It's, again, just the 2024-2025 NFL regular season. He goes in reverse order, 7 down to 1. Here he is.
This list is tricky because it's this year. It's not who do I think is the best quarterback in the NFL, or it's who do I think played the best this year. Doesn't necessarily mean they had the best stats. Maybe they led their team to victories. Maybe they won a lot of games. Maybe they won with less. Who knows what it is? But this is who I think played, in my opinion, the top 7 quarterbacks in the league this year. Starting from 7 to 1, Justin Herbert. Number 6, Sam Darnold. Number 5, Jared Goff. Number 4, Patrick Mahomes. Number 3, Josh Allen. Number 2, Joe Burrow. And number 1, Lamar Jackson.
Can you do just the very end? Oh, you have it. Okay, good.
Oh, I've got it right here. The top 7 quarterback rankings. Ben Roethlisberger's for the 2024-2025 NFL regular season in reverse order. Justin Herbert, 7. Sam Darnold, 6. Jared Goff, 5. Patrick Mahomes, 4. Josh Allen, 3. Joe Burrow, 2. And Lamar Jackson, 1.
So just to be clear, with people talking that it should be Josh Allen, is he in the Hall of Fame? Is Ben Roethlisberger already in there? I don't know if has it been 5 years since he retired?
He's not eligible yet.
He's not eligible yet. Okay, well, he's a future Hall of Famer for sure. And listen, I think I haven't watched Justin Herbert too much, but the top 6 have had a phenomenal season. Patrick Mahomes more for just last-minute heroics rather than just stats. We're living in a golden age right now, a golden year of quarterback, because a lot of these guys, maybe from 1 through 6, may have had a better case last year to win MVP, right? Including Lamar, 2024 Lamar over 2023 Lamar. Like, a lot of these guys could have won it last year. I mean, it's been a phenomenal year. But the guy that most people are arguing over Lamar, a future Hall of Famer, has his number 3. Not just behind Lamar, but behind Lamar and Joe Burrow. To me, now these are just rankings. He's not talking about MVP, right?
Just based on play. The word MVP was never used when divvying it up.
Okay. Well, then that's
but
fair.
It's suggested, though. It's certainly suggested.
It's suggested, but obviously he's not considering that Joe Burrow isn't in the playoffs. He's looking at, you know what I mean? Like, do you know what I mean? Whereas most valuable player, like, you have to be in the playoffs to be an MVP. So I would be curious if a follow-up question would be asked in terms of MVP. But it is, without a doubt, Lamar Jackson is having a historic season. And I understand that Josh Allen has set some history too in terms of, like, how many times he's thrown for 40 touchdowns in consecutive years. Like, that's very impressive, but that obviously is not an argument to win MVP this year. He does have that game where he had 3 touchdown rushes and 3 touchdown passes, and that's great for his MVP ballot, but obviously you need to take into consideration the entire year. And when you look at the entire year, it's so abundantly clear to me that Lamar Jackson is having the best year.
Well,
so I'm right there with Ben Roethlisberger on that.
Yeah. And a couple other guys, as we were tweeted at, we were emailed, we were DM'd. Dominique Foxworth, former Raven.
Yep.
Ryan Russillo, popular media personality and voter for both NBA MVP and NFL. Is he an NFL MVP voter? Or is that Dominique?
Dominique is not a voter, but the way Russillo's talking in this clip, here's the problem. We don't have a full list, right? We don't have a list. I have a list of last year, but we don't have a list of this year. So we don't know, but the way Ryan talks here, he's making it sound like he had a vote because he had one in the NBA, and then he says who he voted for. He's like, yeah.
Okay.
So I think based off of his words, he has an MVP vote, but I don't have that official list.
Just to be clear, you and I are interpreting this correctly, and I'll be curious to see, or excuse me, similarly, you and I are interpreting the clip that we're about to share with you the same way, and we're curious to see if the chat does as well. This is a little bit more of an extended clip. It goes about 4 or 5 minutes. It's between Ryan.
Are you sure it's 4 or 5 minutes?
Well, I have it all together.
Oh, you do. So what you're going to listen to the playoffs?
It does.
Okay, let's pause in between topics then.
And I'll let you lead this because this was your idea to bring it in. Okay. Again, we want to say thank you to all of you who made us aware of this. By the way, we're 50 away from 7,000 concurrents. So thank you guys for a jam-packed, big-time Tuesday. Thank you for being here. And here is Ryan Russillo and Dominique Foxworth.
Okay, so
going with Lamar again for MVP.
Hold on, let's just. Okay, so that did not start with playoffs.
Well, no.
Okay.
Which is what you just asked me, and I said yes. But what I should have followed up on is that it's starting with his MVP vote.
Okay, so it's starting with his MVP vote, and I just want to real quick before we move on to it. The chat said in that podcast with Ben Roethlisberger, he later did say he thinks Lamar is the MVP. Okay, so just make that clear there. Okay, so he's starting off explaining who he voted for, and they get into a, I think, fascinating conversation about stats versus narrative.
I ended up going with Lamar again for MVP. I think Allen is like, if that's your pick, I'm not going to scream and yell about it. But I don't know when it dawned on me. Maybe it was back like talking with Dilfer, where I was like, I think that 7 to 9 interceptions is kind of the sweet zone for a quarterback. All right. Because if you have like none, and I know Brady's had some absurd years, and Rodgers has had just ridiculous years where they're so dialed in and they know everything that's happening, where an interception is basically the defender did something he wasn't supposed to do. Right. Yeah. But with Lamar in this new offense, especially when you go through the interceptions and the first 3 of the season weren't even on him. Like, are we looking at somebody that needs to maybe pull the trigger a little bit more? Because like when I looked at the Caleb stuff, I'm like, this is actually a bad stat for him. Right. This isn't a good stat. This is a bad stat for him, even though it sounds cool in the record books.
I get what you're saying, but then you look at the production, it's incredible. And I would even argue that the 4th interception is not on him either. Like, that's man coverage. You're not you sit down in the zone. Bateman, like, you sit down in the zone. You keep running and man.
It just looks so much worse than the other 3 because of the coverage and what the options were to that throw. But go ahead.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, you can, we want to settle on there was one interception that was Lamar's fault. That's fine, and maybe there were some dropped interceptions somewhere along the way.
I'm sure there were, but
that's hilarious because you and I were talking about the interceptions and we brought them all up on the screen, right? And we showed, and we became nitpicky. Like, you were like, oh, okay, well, the mark of the 3 drops. It's like, I guess Mark was the furthest away, but like Dominique is like, okay, if we want to say that Lamar Jackson was to blame for 1 interception, okay, we can deal with that. And that is what's insane. And that's where the history is. Nobody in the NFL, Bobby, nobody had fewer interceptions when they threw for 40 or more touchdowns. Like, we're talking about an NFL history with Tom Brady, with Peyton Manning, with Steve Young, with Joe Montana, like Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes now. Like, any of those guys, if they threw for over 40 touchdowns, they did not have as few as interceptions as Lamar. And here we are laughing about how maybe 1 was his fault. But as a defensive back, he's saying, no, it was on Bateman because it wasn't in zone. He wasn't supposed to stop. That
is what's so wild. Just to go back to that for a half second, because I really remember going back and forth with you on that show thinking, oh, he was just trying to find the soft spot in the zone. Dominique, it was man. It was man. Like, we were looking for excuses. We were looking for reasonings of why Bateman, could have not been at fault, or maybe, just maybe, right? This was Lamar's miscommunication. No, it was Bateman. He shouldn't have stopped. Right. There was no soft spot.
Right. And there's the DB able to give this and that. And so like, That's insane. And by the way, when I said Allen had history too, I meant to say he scored 40 touchdowns in each of the last 5 seasons. I accidentally said through. So he has scored 40 touchdowns. But again, that is neither here nor there. We're talking about this season. And so Ryan's question of like, he was liking it to Bears quarterback, whose name is slipping me right now.
Caleb Williams,
where he's like, wait, that few interceptions isn't good for him because he's not even taking shots that he should. And here Dominic is like, yeah, that's true when you have low production. But when you have 4,100 passing yards, we're talking about an interception rate that is hands down best in the NFL this season. And I need to go look at it historically. But I remember NFL Network did that, and he was like number 3 all time, something crazy with how low his interception rate with this much production. And so them saying all this and kind of setting it up, Dominique is now about to talk about why he used to be all Allen, and now that he's talking about these stats, why he's switched over to Lamar.
But the fact that when you watch the highlight tape or his low light tape of interceptions, it all is like, damn, they sure let my man down. It's hard for me to be like, hey, this is rough. And if he had low production numbers, then I would agree with you. But he doesn't. I think I was a Josh Allen should win MVP guy until probably 2 weeks ago. And I think it was brought to my attention that how much I was leaning on the story of Josh Allen and not the production. And I think what I do on some of these type of decisions is ask myself, like, which way do I want to be wrong? You know, it's like, let's say that you're wrong. Which way are you most comfortable with being wrong? And I am very comfortable with being wrong about the MVP putting up the numbers that Lamar has put up this year.
Okay, so I want to pause it right there. So he's saying he switched from Allen to Lamar because he said he was so caught up in the Allen story, right? It's like, it's his time. He had a couple of those good games against number 1 seeds, and I do think that is very impressive. I'm not going to take that away from Josh. I just don't know that it's enough in the totality. And so he had to like face himself and say, wait a minute. Yeah, this is a great story. But if I look back 5 years from now, and because it's so tight, there's going to be a side that's wrong, right? With it being so tight. It's not this unanimous thing in 2019 or 49 out of 50 votes in 2024. This is going to be tight. And so he's like, if I'm going to be wrong and people look back on this, I got to feel comfortable with what I'm wrong with. And I'm going to be like, 10 years from now, no, he had the lowest interception rate. He had 4 interceptions and maybe one of them was wrong. He had 4,100 yards and 900 rushing, which was historic and transformative. Like how I can't be wrong. I can't look back and feel good about that 5 years from now.
In other words, he got caught up in the narrative.
Yes.
You said the story, which is also the narrative.
The narrative.
The national narrative that so often infuses NFL circles from a national storyline standpoint. That takes away from the integrity of what is a storied award. So
yes, and I'll just put this in here. I didn't grab the clip because I thought this sufficed, but I was watching everybody's favorite show, The Facility, yesterday, and James Jones, who's been, campaigning for Lamar to win it, and obviously Emmanuel Ocho is the only one that has the vote on that show. And Emmanuel finally backed off and said, "Man, I don't know anymore." And he's like, I got to go back and watch stuff. And then he brought up Lamar having King Henry again, which we talked about a lot yesterday. And James Jones was like, I hear you. Derrick Henry has 1,900 yards. I hear you. He goes, but this isn't like, oh, Lamar had a good season. He was like, he got 1,900 yards and Lamar still put up 5,000 more. And then he brought up these historic stats that we're talking about. He's like, bro, I hear you. King Henry helps. But it's not like he's just like having the same, like this is historic. And he kept looking at him. He's like, MVP voter. It's history though. MVP voter. It's history though. And Acho just kept laughing. And he was like, he heard the points. Whereas before Acho's been like Allen. Now he's like, okay, well now I got to stop and think about this for a minute. And it's because of this type of stuff too. Like I think that sometimes narrative can overpower everything else if the stats are close. But it's not even close right now. Yep. It's not even close. All right, should we continue?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We'll say that the other thing that jumps out to me this season and last season for the MVP race is I'm reminded how much of the stuff is out of their control, because I think we're having an entirely different conversation if the Chiefs aren't the number 1 seed. Like, the Chiefs have lost a few more games and the Bills were the 1 seed and Josh Allen was on the best team. I think where Josh Allen is running away with MVP. Or even if the Jets were better and last week was a big showdown to win the division and Josh Allen won that game against the Jets, we'd have an entirely different conversation. Like, the story has, in order for the story to beat the stats, the story has to be so good. And as much as I think we all thought the Ravens were better, the Bills were still projected to win 10 wins, and they did pretty well. Or they did incredibly well, but it's not like he just pulled a trash pile to the top of the league. So it's hard for me to feel comfortable. If I'm going to be wrong, the way that I would like to be wrong is the one that's supported by the numbers, not the one that's like a lot more about storyline.
Yeah, I don't like Lamar's won it. Like, that's not what the award should be. I still have some regrets about my Embiid vote over Jokic, but I realize that those regrets weren't there when it was happening, because the way that season closed with those two players, I felt fine about the Embiid vote because it was so tough. It was a really tough vote, and it was I think not as tough last year, but the order for the MVP vote for me was really tough, because I'm sitting there looking at my group going, whoever I have fourth here it's gonna feel ridiculous that I have this person fourth.
Can you give us, Bobby, the background? So he's saying that he's looking back on his NBA MVP voting and is showing that maybe he has a little bit of regret. Can you for those that aren't following the NBA as closely, what's the background to that?
Just the back and forth and the closeness of the race between two of the greatest centers that we've ever seen, one of which plays for your favorite team, of course, and Nikola Jokic, and then for Philadelphia, Joel Embiid. These guys have been so back and forth in recent years. And I was actually just pulling up the years in which they've won the award, these guys, because they've gone back and forth. So 2024, just this past year, was Jokic. He also has 2022 and 2021 accolades of that award. And of course, he's an NBA champion from 2023, which is something that Embiid is still chasing. As far as Joel's his overall resume, he's yet to win an overall MVP. He's 2023 was his first. And aside from that, it's been all Jokic. So it's essentially 3 versus 1, meaning has there been voter fatigue that's gone with Jokic, much like some have said there is with Lamar this year.
Right. And so maybe that's what made him ultimately sway to Lamar. He's like, I'm not doing that again. You know what I mean? I'm not going to do that again. Okay. Just a little bit more from this clip.
So I don't think that a vote for Josh Allen is necessarily wrong, but then I always ask myself, like, if Lamar had never won one, would we be having this conversation? And the fact that they close strong, that, record, I think sometimes, like, whatever propaganda is being put out there, it'll be like, well, how can you do this when you look at the record and you look at the seeding and all that stuff? And it's like, I don't know. It's not going to be the end all be all for me. And it's the same thing in basketball. Like, if you're a 4 or 5 seed, but you're 3 wins behind, and I'm supposed to vote for the 2 seed guy because it sounds better. I think the 1 seed thing would be a ton of momentum for Buffalo. Both of these guys did incredible jobs carrying teams that at many times this year felt like the only way they had a chance to win was because of who was behind center.
So that's the first time I've really heard, because I'm a little bit surprised, and I saw chat bring this up earlier, that these MVP voters aren't talking more about strength of schedule. When Josh Allen has 13 wins and Lamar has 12, one's a 3 seed and one's a 2 seed. Like, he's saying, if you got the 1 seed, then okay, that adds to your story, but you're the 2 seed, 1 game ahead of the 3 seed. And so to him, that wasn't very convincing to be like, okay, I should hand it over to Allen more. And if he wanted to, on top of it, he could have talked about the strength of schedule, which obviously the Ravens had a much, much tougher slate as they've played everybody that's made the AFC playoffs this year. One other thing, we won't play it, but they talked a little bit about Lamar's reputation in the playoffs. And obviously we're coming up against the Steelers, who have, outside of just this last game that they had each other, the Steelers have performed very well against Lamar. So you have kind of like a double kryptonite, if you will, that it's the playoffs when Lamar has the reputation that he has, although people don't give him the credit in the games he did play well. And then you've got the Steelers, who outside of this last game have played him really well. So you have that kind of double whammy. And Dominique was like, here's why I'm not worried this time. He's like, and I definitely been worried before. He's like, in the past, the key was just blitz Lamar. Make him throw from the pocket and blitz him. And he said, you know, throughout the regular season, you would see that worked, and they never solved it. And so then they get to the postseason. It's like, okay, well, here they are. Some of the best players are just blitzing nonstop, and they couldn't solve it. And he's like, the reason why I'm not worried this time around is because Lamar has solved the blitz. He has solved it. And whether it's the blitz or otherwise, like, he's been fine. And so hopefully that is an addition to Derrick Henry being out there, that Lamar understanding the game more like Neo in the Matrix and being able to call things at the line of scrimmage will also be a difference maker this time around.